Brian, and this is our Biology Summer Institute report. Our membership this summer included myself and Paul and Steve McLaren, and then Dr. Matt Gabaldon, she's not here, and then Kim Kushner and Nick Alfonso, both from PCC. I'm going to show you what the problem that we were trying to solve or talk about or overcome from our summer discussions, and then some of our goals, and wrapped into those goals are a few of our deliverables. So our problem is A&P, Biology 223 and 224, Human Anatomy and Physiology. And the problem is student success. So our DF and W rate in this class ranges somewhere between 80% and 30%, depending on the semester and the instructor. And Steve, that's right, those are valid numbers. The national average for pass rates in A&P are about 50 to 60%. So it's not a CSU Pueblo problem, it's a national problem with this class and this type of material. So that's our problem, and it's a problem that gets to the higher levels of administration. So A&P is often, has one of the higher DF and W rates on campus. It's also one of the larger classes on campus, and so from a retentions perspective, people get really worried about this class. It's a very mixed population. So A&P is a large class. We run about 150 to 200 students a semester through it, at least in the fall, 100 in the spring. So they're massive classes. So it's in a big lecture room, because that's where we can do it. And then it has many, many lab sections, and those lab sections are run by either faculty or most likely teaching assistants. The population is mixed, meaning that we're full of freshmen and sophomores, juniors, and seniors. In previous analysis of success rates in the course, their grade, their year at school here does not predict their success, which is very interesting to me. So we had seniors failing at the exact same rate as freshmen are failing in this course. And it's a service course, and so this is why this is one of the first times we've talked about this class in biology. It has it has multiple masters. Our majors don't take this class. This is not a class for our majors. We have a few, maybe 2 or 3 that take it each semester because they are interested in a professional school that would like to see that on their transcript. But most of the individuals in this course belong to nursing, the pre-nursing majors, and then exercise, sports phys, and athletic training. It's also a GT class, or a ST class for Gen Ed. And so we have quite a few students in there who knows, psych majors, art majors, who are using this class to satisfy their ST requirement. And so that's our problem. And so our overall goals when we came together was, for our PCC partners, was, well, what is the community college doing? And I've been talking to Nick for a while about this. 2 years ago, we had an unsuccessful trip to Capboard to look at putting prereqs in front of A&P. And for very good reasons. It's not our majors, and so I didn't think this through maybe as well as I should have. But pre-nurses can't cram any more credit in, period. There's just no room in the curriculum. So a prereq is basically off the table for nursing majors. And so then it's dead in the water, basically, when we come. Plus, for other majors, we're adding something on into that class that they have to then add on. Community college has gone ahead and put forward a prereq for their A&P. So the community college network has Biology 2 as the prereq for A&P. They were able to do that by allowing pre-nurses through the community college to be able to test out of it if they could. That allowed the pre-nurses the flexibility then that they needed within their curriculum. So when we started to look at what we can do, we looked at 3 basic major categories for solutions or things to work on. And the first one is curriculum. And this is, we've heard this topic discussed multiple times today already, is the breadth versus depth argument within a course. A&P, though, is a little bit different in that because of the multiple masters, there's certain content that must be covered. And so there's certain students who are in certain programs that must have content for their degree plan. And the nurses need certain content. If they go to a CNA route, there's certain content. If they do med tech, there's certain content that they must have. And so how do you handle that in a class where there's multiple students and multiple masters? The breadth versus depth argument. Plus, when you pick up those textbooks, and I'll talk about textbooks later, they're massive. They're $250. They're thick. They have everything in them. And then as an instructor, you're supposed to figure out what you're supposed to teach from within it. The alignment of lecture and lab we wanted to work on. It is, and Paul, you can jump in here, is it struggling? Is it?
It's still struggling a little bit in 223 to exactly align. I mean, the class meets 3 times a week, the lab meets once a week. And to try to get enough time in lab to cover the material we have to cover.
And when we say it meets once a week, that'd be great if they all met on Monday, but we have so many sections of lab, they're meeting Monday, Tuesday, and or Wednesday, and so we don't know when it can happen. Inside of the curriculum, though, we did have some wonderful discussions about embedding the support material. So in the past, the first chapter of every A&P textbook is Intro to Chemistry, and tries to teach them the chemistry that they would need to understand physiology, which is huge. And we've been doing that forever, right? The first test, the first chapter is all about chemistry. So what we said is, well, let's scrap that idea. And if we need to teach chemistry in a topic, let's pull it out when we need it. And then it finally has some context behind it instead of just being content. And then finally, more frequent testing. There's a lot of literature out there on the frequency of testing and student success. For us, last semester, one of the other instructors for this course, Jeff Smith, added another exam into the course curriculum and had success with students. And so the question, of course, is unless you're going to test these students at night, you're losing another meeting time. And so then for our second set of goals, academic support, for the lab specifically, can we obtain a material so that the students have a whole extra set of stuff down in PROPEL? And so a set of bones, a skeleton, a set of the models that we use. And the models are all linked to the textbook the students use. So the pictures in the lab manual are the pictures of the models, and the models they can go and touch at any time. So if there's extra time that they need with that material, it could be present in PROPEL. And then here, this idea of this just-in-time student academic support. Here's the idea behind this. The students all take a quiz over the weekend. The quiz is through Connect, which is part of the textbook. The Connect then gives us a report on the class on how the students did. And remember, there's 150 of them, so we need management software usually to do this. And Paul then can analyze that and identify the 2 or 3 major topics that the students were struggling with for that quiz, and that would be for that previous week. And then Paul then forwards that to me or straight to the SI tutor or to Abby, and then the SI tutor, and we're lucky to have an SI tutor for this course, 2 of them, and partly funded by PROPEL, thank you, and partly funded by the athletic department. They have that information, and then they can concentrate and tool what they're going to do in their tutoring sessions to those 3 topics. And then finally, positive messaging. This course has a bad rap, and it has for a while, and it still does. It doesn't help when you have a student take it 3, 4, 5 times. So the positive messaging from the beginning, just coming in there and setting a whole new stage for this class on the very first day, that we're all in it together, that we have all the support material for you, is something that we're trying to concentrate again on. And so for the curriculum, the breadth versus depth, or another way of thinking about this with A&P and the type of subject matter that we're talking about here, is memorization versus learning, or memorization and learning or learning. So, our question was, can we change our teaching practices and yet still cover that required content? Can we go into depth about certain topics but still have enough time and energy to cover the content that we need to get through? The textbook has been identified as a problem, and so Paul and Annette did a lot of work with the book reps and looked at the free resources that are out there. And we're going to be moving to a new textbook spring 16. We don't know which one yet, so the debate and argument continues. They are thinner and cheaper, which makes me happy as the chair. There's free ones out there, but the free ones don't come with some of that important management software, the quiz management software that we need if we're going to do the just-in-time student academics.
Have you looked into the build-your-own textbook?
Right. Yeah. Can we get the software that we would need with a build-your-own textbook kind of option, right? I know that Pearson or McGraw-Hill will carve up a textbook for you, and so that we could identify and then mix and match for you, and then we could still use their back-end computer resources. Alignment of lecture lab, we changed our first lab, right? We've changed a few things in that lab. Paul, do you want to tell us? I forgot.
So the first lab used to be kind of a throwaway do nothing, where they just kind of learn scientific method stuff. We've switched that into a lab that concentrates more on orienting them towards the scale of biological objects, subcellular objects, all the way up to whole organisms, and working on their grasp of the metric system, which is somewhat tenuous.
This country should just change it at the beginning. We'd be much better off.
In our support material, and Paul can speak to this more about not using the first week to lecture Gen Chem.
Yeah, I skipped that chapter entirely during that first week. I've carved it up into the chapters where I actually talk about diffusion for some physiological reason that gets put farther down in the semester. I still have to work out with the net where some of that chemistry is going to be used in AMP2, but so it's just carved out and rearranged. They have to flip back and forth in their books a lot more because of this, but putting it much closer in proximity when I'm actually going to talk about covalent bonds or ionic bonds or electrolytes or something, to where they're actually going to see what the electrolytes do.
I think it makes more sense to me personally. And then more frequency testing, and we're going to be adding one test.
There's now 6 tests in a final, so that's actually pretty close to 2 extra tests.
Okay, and based on our results from last year, at least last year, our student success rates went up with more frequent testing, and there's a lot of potential reasons. There's less material on an exam now, but also there's a lot of work that the more you have to go in and pull out information.
In addition to just rearranging the chapters and parts of chapters, I've also, my syllabus, gotten down to specific page numbers that they have to cover, cutting out portions of pretty much every chapter that I've just decided isn't going towards what they really need to know. So while we're still using the thick textbook, I've slimmed it down to what amounts to a short textbook.
One thing too, because you were talking a little before about the additional test takes an additional period.
Mm-hmm.
With the Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, we now have 150 extra minutes because we're going to 55 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I found in my Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, it's better. I thought it was fine, but it's better with the additional 5 minutes each class.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's quite a bit more that you can cover, and then if you say, okay, we're going to sacrifice 55 minutes, you cover that in 3 weeks out of the extra 15 minutes a week that you have. So
Right.
I think it's better.
Have you thought about, instead of putting the onus of doing, the extra chemistry or whatever, having them go out and see there's some neat stuff out there that they can be looking at on the web that might cover some of those topics. And there's some beautiful pH and buffer simulations that I've been playing with, that I'm gonna try to do some stuff on the web for my biochem class, because this is something they forget. But there's a lot of stuff out there that maybe you don't have to deal with completely on your own.
The textbook Connect stuff, the quiz, it has all of those simulations, and it's
That's
part of their
okay.
requirement
Okay.
within the course. So, yeah, we're trying to employ as much, and in the past we have. It's about whether or not they are, and is it improving our success rates?
CU Boulder has some really, this teaching and learning stuff there has some really, really neat stuff.
Materials and lab, I mentioned that it's really going to be great to have the same stuff, as at CSU Pueblo, and many of your departments will have the same thing, where we've got a hodgepodge of models and a hodgepodge of things. To have a standardized set that's the same as what's in the lab handbook makes all the difference. And so here's some from our first quiz. So we just piloted this. The students just take the first exam. We have a population of students who came to the SI tutoring session. There's 16 of them. And a population of students who did not. That was 67 students, and those are the students who took the exam. The quiz questions 6, 9, and 10, do you remember I asked you that last night? 6 was on...
Question 6 was on homeostasis, question 9 was on subcellular organelles and membrane proteins, I think, and then 10 was concepts in cell permeability.
And so these were the 3 topics that, based on the quiz, were identified as being low. And then you can see that at least in 2 of the 3 topics, the students had an increase in how they performed, anyways, on this assessment. Percent of the correct exam questions. So we had multiple questions on the exam that tested their knowledge of these topics. And so we had a little bit of...
What happened to 6? Did they do them all?
Well, and the population is pretty small, right? So we've got, and also there's only a couple questions. So,
So there's only 2 test questions that corresponded to that, and to that one quiz question.
yeah,
And there was only 16 people that went for 2 others.
right. So one kid can really mess that up.
I sometimes wonder if something that they've learned before, like when you go to college, sometimes you have to unlearn some of the things that you learned incorrectly before. I just wonder how much has to do with what they already come with, and then how much has changed. How do you get to that?
Right. It happens a lot in College Biology 1 with the misconceptions that we have to destroy and then rebuild, around evolution is a big one. And so, yeah, misconceptions certainly, they come with a view of the world and how things work, and then having to redo that.
Brian, did you do overall quiz score in the tutor versus not?
No,
Paul, no?
not overall. We did do overall test score on tutored versus not, and these are rough, because my memory's not perfect, but the ones that went to tutoring averaged an 85%, and those that didn't were down around 60% over the
No, the tutoring is twice a week. Is it twice?
They have hours every day.
Every
but
day.
It's,
every day,
limited.
mornings, afternoons, they really spread it around.
Propel's been great about, we have a room that's just for A&P, so that we can have the materials present there. We're still not getting a lot of usage, as much as we'd like.
I think if you could talk about overall quiz scores on the tutors versus non, that's pretty powerful potential data.
And then we're getting into the population of have help-seeking behavior versus not, and we're engaging a lot of other things that are going on here with these topics, not just tutoring or not. And then, as I mentioned, we've been trying to start the class off with a lot of positive messaging and talking to the students. Steve, you had one interaction with a student that was...
Yeah, he had taken it twice before, and we talked about the first 2 days, so it looked like it was going to be much better.
So that's one little snippet. So. We hope to improve. And that's all we've got. So, thank you. Oh, the PCC connection. So it was great to have them over. They have it ready. I mean, they run a machine over there, right? right? And they're constrained by the community college system with how they teach A&P and their requirements, because they have 2-year degree programs that have specific things inside of A&P that must be taught for their certification processes. And so having them relate what's going on with them, how they've managed it, how they're able to get the prereq through the community college provost, it was a very large battle.
Has that prereq shown a difference when their outcomes in AP?
They believe so. Their class sizes have dramatically decreased. So they may have just shifted the problem to the prereq now, but they do have seen increased success rates. They're making them take a whole year of bio before they take A&P.
Are you creating your own test banks or using something in text, or are you?
It's kind of a mix. I make up my own questions, modify the ones I get from the textbook.
And then you deliver them in Blackboard, or?
No, these are going to be fill in the oval, multiple choice,
So you
scan
put
chart
your-
sheets.
So
This
then
is
you
such a
also
large,
have to, like,
such a large class.
have your receipt too.
Well, we know who came through PROPEL. When they log in
Yeah,
and log
I
out.
can report every week looking at the database, because I have assignments when they log in, they can put SI session. And Angela and Lexi prompt them to log in. It's very good.
Wow, you're talking about this course. That's great.
It's a long time coming. Steve and I have been talking for about a year about problems.
And we're tinkering with a lot of things this semester, so at the end of it, it could be a little difficult to suss out which ones were successful and which ones weren't.
True.
I think that kind of data is going to help us.
But you'll have student success rates,
Yeah.
which is the ultimate thing.
Oh yeah, and retention's a big thing, and this is a big piece of a lot of majors that are not biology. So it's kind of hard for us to think.
So what is the main problem in a class? Usually identify certain part of it, okay, this is that nobody gets, or this is everybody gets, or is it all throughout, little tiny pieces everywhere, there's something that's
There are some
that's
that
not right.
I mean, excitation and contraction coupling in the muscles, action potentials in the neurons, those are two usually difficult concepts, but, so,
They're not easy at any level,
yeah.
really.
So, I'm working on ways of making it easier, and part of that's moving the chemistry closer to those, because they're both heavily reliant on chemistry. So,
One thing that we talked about, which we didn't put on there, was doing some kind of study guides. So, there is part of this is, and with any class, is they want to know what's going to be on the test. And so my thought is that's not everything that you teach, but it's part of it. And so if we have, I think if they have a clear understanding about what's going to be on there, then this is what they can study. Because there's a lot of information on there, and you'd like it to be, every now and then I kind of say, okay, remember a month ago we talked about this, and they're like, and so, they have other classes, they have other things going on, and so I think if we can sort of narrow it down to, here's the stuff, and so I like the pages idea, here's the pages that you can concentrate on instead of the 500 pages, whatever the book is. I think that's better, and I was just thinking as you were doing this in my head, I have 3 people I advise that are staying an extra semester and paying for it themselves because they're off the scholarship. And then I probably have that or more that just aren't finishing because they didn't get
Get through this
or
class.
they didn't get a C or better in the class. And so, that's important to us that, so I think across the university, this is easily the highest failure rate class at the university. So it'd be nice to, change those statistics. So, we see these people come in, in some cases it's their fault. Because if over half the class is passing, that means they're doing something right to get a C or better. And so, it's nice that we're working on pedagogy, it's nice we're working on the success rate, and that was my, what I wanted to bring to that. And this was nice being in, just discussing pedagogy in general. And so I was thinking about some of the stuff I teach in my class and how I teach it.
I think on that first test, roughly 30%, again, this is a rough estimate, 30% got D's and F's, and the rest got C's or better.
It's better.
It's better.
So does the 3 credit actually
could teach A&P all day long.
But what you're trying to convey.
But, well, the problem that is that it's a service course, but we can't really mess around with credit hours, because the nursing program is already up against their barrier. So we could convert it to 5, but they'd have to give something up, and they are not gonna give anything.
And we'd have to do the same as well.
It's not them, it's their overarching, whichever you guys go.
Any other questions? So this class has a special place in my heart. Because it's a really good example of inclusivity or lack thereof. So I was a bio major as an undergrad, and the class that was similar to this one in my university was STD, sexually transmitted diseases. For some reason, nursing majors, like all these different people had to take it. So we had a huge group of major students and non-major students. And the way the university fixed that was by differentiating for the types of majors. So it was on, everybody needs to have these competencies by the end of the semester. However, if you're a bio major, you have to have this too in order to set you up for the next one. And the way they compensated was through an extra credit hour. And it was kind of like, 301 and then 301S or something, or 30 whatever. It was like an extra credit. But we also have to do the same lectures, and the exams were differentiated where the majors or the people who needed, for example, A&P is a really good example because there's concepts in A&P that we need to understand, systems, changes, interactions. If you test students all across the board on those concepts, but then you drill the students that have to know everything that needs to be memorized because they need it because their profession is dependent on that, right? Their next steps in the profession. It's a different way of thinking about it, and I totally understand what you're saying about nursing and being so like, can't really change that. But that is the way to say, the reality is, this is kind of the core of the class. But if you're gonna pursue careers in these areas, you have to have this too. And that goes back to using extra materials to help build those, and actually incorporate it into the assessment piece as a separate assessment piece, and it's kind of an interesting, and why I say it's an equity versus equality question. When it comes to equity, it's equitable for a nurse to have everything that he or she needs to pursue and be successful in that. When we talk about equality, we say everybody has to have the same thing, but that's not working for everybody, you see?
Yeah.
So it's kind of this, it's a really good example of a class that we have to just we have to have a different way of thinking about the course instead of our traditional, we do things this way, we've always done it this way because it's obviously not working for the students, So that's kind of like, and not just those students, it's the professions too, because now we have, less students that can go into these different areas. But at the same time, we don't want to water it. When it comes to competency-based education, we say, you know what? Fine, your first semester, you're only able to show this and that. You're going to take it again. You're not going to show me the same thing again. You need to work on what you're missing and actually get, you can't do 150 individualized plans for each student, but the reality is if a student's taking it for 3 years, by the end of those 3 years, they need to have a solid A&P foundation. If that's how long it took them, that's how long it took them. But some students get it in 1 semester. So it's a very different way of thinking about education, very non-traditional way, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there because I do those kind of things.
We talked about having different courses for different populations, and I think that would be great with staffing.
Right. So that was one way that, the university I attended kind of, if in 150 people, like the 150 students, maybe 100 of them were majors, but the other 50 weren't. That's how they dealt with it. It was still one instructor, it was still breakout sessions, and they were still mixed, but it was the differentiation in assignments and in evaluation that they did. So just a suggestion.